Arts Commission meeting for Monday, February 11th. We'll do a roll call. Susan? Nope. Veronica?
Present.
Justin?
Here.
Ron?
Present.
Ian?
Present.
David?
Present.
Okay. First item on the agenda for tonight is the approval for the agenda for February 11th, 2019. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns about the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda is approved. First item then for tonight is the approval of the minutes from the January 23rd, 2019 meeting of the Landmarks Commission. Those meeting minutes are included in your packet. I assume everybody's had a chance to review those and take a look at them. Any comments, questions, so forth? Then do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. So we are on to item D of the agenda, which is regular business. Consideration with possible action on a major facade renovation at 218, 224 North Adams Street. There is information by staff in the packet. I guess, Jason, do you want to start with maybe informing us as to what we're looking at tonight?
Well, there are two separate buildings. I think our primary focus is on the 218 to 220 North Adams, which you see here on the screen. Until fairly recently, the building, it's the 1.5-story symmetric facade, 2-bay job right there. It looked like the photo on the left. And fairly recently, some alterations have been done, and you see those in the photo on the right. And those alterations include staining of the not historic brick and putting in a corrugated looking metal fascia over top of some painted stone bases at those storefronts. Also discussed briefly is the taller building to the left in the picture, the 3-story 222 to 224 North Adams. I don't know that we want to spend a lot of time talking about that one though.
If you guys have questions, we detailed what had happened previously with the Historic Preservation Commission in the staff report, so if you have any questions regarding that. There were some changes from what they presented to what's on the building, but the historic fabric was already negated during the HBC process, so not a lot we can do at this point, but it is part of the overall project.
And I'll just state too, as I like to tell you every meeting, my recommendation is just that, it's a recommendation. You have the authority to do as you please. The recommendation specific to this 1.5-story building is to not issue a certificate of appropriateness for the work done, including the staining of the brick and the metal fascia panels. Those reasons are stated in your packet. Maybe we're at the end of the road here.
Oh, is everything gonna fail us today?
I'm not even seeing a light coming on, Stephanie, so
Okay.
I can go click the...
That's fine. Everything's fine. That's for this one. Also that. Yes,
I can do that. So a little bit of background. In August of last year, the owner of the building submitted plans that included a full facade reconstruction of the 3-story building on the left, but no changes to the 1.5-story building on the right.
I think that's incorrect. Can you go back?
Yes, I'm trying to. The machine apparently is slow.
So the building on the left is showing the gray ephes. The building on the right is showing that same gray ephes over that existing brickwork.
So what was discussed verbally at the meeting was that this gray color on the building on the right was not ephes, but rather was just shading of the drawing, and that absolutely no changes would be happening to the building on the right. Whether or not those verbal comments were conflicting with the drawing, I really couldn't tell you, but no part of the HPC meeting in August dealt with the building on the right, so there was no proposed change to the building on the right. Now, here are the plans submitted, dated what, late October, is it, Stephanie? Or was it November?
That one is the newest one as of January,
As of January.
yes. I didn't put the one from in between, so just showed the difference between the all the way setback and further forward.
Okay. But I think this was the first notice we had of any changes to the
Yes, to the
1.5
218.
story building.
Yes.
And I think the chronology there was that the city contacted the owner saying, hey, we noticed changes that have not yet been reviewed by the Landmarks Commission to the 1.5 story building. What is that? And at that point, we received these plans that show the installation of the corrugated metal siding and the staining of the brick. In recommending the denial of a certificate of appropriateness, in your packet, you'll see I noted the architectural style of Tudor and Elizabethan Revival, that staining of brick and metal siding is not appropriate to that. And I also mention other buildings in the district. This district is somewhat unique in that the major architectural styles are clustered together. There's a classical revival cluster down here, there's a Romanesque cluster in the middle, and there happens to be a Tudor revival Elizabethan cluster in the northern end. And by cluster, I mean these are all of the Tudor revival Elizabethan buildings in the district. They just happen to all be kind of next to each other. So the recommendation for denial is based on these changes, the proposed changes being incompatible with the style of the building. There's another of other reasons there saying that, you know, this isn't compatible with the Secretary of the Interior standards. And the recommendation goes on to say that the staining of the brick is likely irreversible, but the corrugated metal siding is recommended to be removed and repair of the material behind that be completed. From there, I don't know that I have much to add, except to again remind you, it's just a recommendation.
There's people in the public present tonight, so I would look for a motion to open up for public comment.
Move to open floor?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody want to comment on this?
Well, I'm the owner of the property. I guess I would ask, commenting just as regarding questions that anyone in the committee might have on it. There's any number of things that have occurred to the building in the time that it's been before the HBC, before the Landmark Commission was instituted. The plans to the city were submitted and permits were issued, most of which occurred during transitional periods of moving from the HBC into the Landmark Commission. Notification sent to us in November, I believe it was the timeline for November. Did talk about some of the changes. I don't have a copy of that letter, but what has been confusing since day one on the project is there's a fair bit of gray area between where the HBC has agreed or disagreed with the alterations to the project and the city issuing permits based off of that. At the time of issuance of the building permits, the city had us to select whether or not we had been before the HPC, which we had, and then permits were issued. So yes, there has been changes. There's been a lot of changes to the building once we got into it, based off of the initial set of drawings that were supplied to the city, and then any forthcoming drawings that were supplied to the city. So much of the alterations that we had talked about during the HBC, we did not do. Setbacks were maintained. The intent was to maintain as much of the building's integrity as we could, but then also to secure the building. The building was in very, very bad condition. So some of the comments that were brought forth from the HPC at that time, one of the major concerns was the amount of EFS that was used on the property. So we made a change to limit the amount of EFS by about 60%. Still required to remove the front, the majority front portion of the damaged area of that building. We decided not to do setbacks because it was structurally, once the building was tore apart, we could tell that the building was, we were safer to restore the building, leave it to its existing location, in other words, not pull the building back, which we didn't know until we started to disassemble the building. So along the way, it's trying to ebb and flow with a very, very old building. It's extremely complex in its nature, far more than what we had anticipated because of its structural issues, not only with the building itself, but also the adjacent buildings, both that BSA Architects building and Republic's building. So the decision was made to keep it, not setting it back. The changes that occur on Republic's face, which would be the 218 address that you're referring to, that is the changes are made to a storefront. Even the building plans dated back to the early 20s, and that building was always shown as a storefront property. That portion of the building was done as a storefront. So the alterations there were really to repair damage that had occurred over the past 10 years and to cover up the deteriorating sandstone that's used on the front of the building, to essentially make that front disappear. Because the historic aspect of the building, the Tudor aspect of the building, is very important. That's why we didn't touch any of the brick that was on the building. So I read the recommendation. I don't agree with it, but it is a matter of opinion. I don't see how it detracts from anything that is surrounding. In fact, I think the reason that we wanted to put the aluminum pack flat on the front was to join the two properties together. Because technically that address now exists as one address. The 218, 220, 222, 224 no longer exists. The building is now one. It is not two separate buildings. It is one building now. That lot line that was previously there has been abolished as of the end of August. So the building is now one contiguous building together. So we wanted them to look, some of them similar, and then keep as much of the historic aspect that we could. Because I think it's a good idea. I'm not trying to change the building completely. I wanted to accent what we could, save what we could, and provide a structurally proper building.
I think part of our problem is, I guess, with, or the question before us is, it's not just about the building, it's about the neighborhood, right? You know, so how it fits in, and that's something that we have to make a determination for as to what the future of the neighborhood is going to be and how it's going to look. You know, so it's not just about your building and what, I mean, making it two buildings into one certainly is a significant change to the character of the building and the neighborhood, you know, or the area, I guess, the district. But, you know, I guess that's really what we have to talk about is how appropriate that I mean, what can we do? We don't want to go back. I think the building looks good, I mean, in my personal opinion, but we have more than just our personal opinions, you know, to riding on the decision here,
I mean, my major, oh, sorry, I was gonna say, my major.
Well, That's all right, I can wait. Hi, Ron, go ahead.
Hi. No, I would say my major question is if you were to force them to tear that part off, how much damage would that cause to the sandstone and stuff underneath it? I mean, seeing that it's sandstone, and I don't know, I just think that that could be a real concern as well. Now that that's attached, I mean,
Sure.
the underlying facade might really get damaged.
And that element of the facade was not historic to the building anyway. It was 2008, so.
Well, I do have a question for you, sir, about the process here, and I am sympathetic to what you were saying, because I saw what was going on and the way you had to take down the front of the 3-story, and I could see all the stuff that was going on in there, and I get where you're coming from. My concern is about the two major issues that were brought forth, the painted brick and the metal facade, correct?
Yes.
All right. My concern is that it seems that was communicated to you that you did need to seek a COA for that work, but it wasn't done. That the COA was not, you did not seek that. That is actually my major concern, is that we have got this ordinance in place to avoid exactly this. Now, was that conveyed to you that you did need to seek for those two issues, the painted brick and the metal facade COA?
It's hard to, I'm not totally positive because I don't have a copy of the letter from November that was referenced. So I'm not going to say one way or the other because I just don't know. What I do know is that the permits had already been issued. The project was deemed by the HPC to not be conforming, right? They didn't agree with doing the project at all.
But that wasn't binding.
Well,
Right, it wasn't binding at the time, no,
The
it
only
wasn't
work
binding
that
at
was
the time.
presented to the HPC was 222 to 224. And at that time, the HPC specifically said, hey, you're not doing anything to 218 to 220? The answer was no, we're not.
But the building permit is issued to 218. The plans subsequently that were submitted to the city were all for 218, 220. It's one parcel, it's one building.
Well, from
So-
the State Historical Society's perspective and from the Department of the Interior's perspective, there'll always be two buildings. Now, you can say that you're trying to meld them into one, which both the state and the feds would take issue with. So calling it one building because the address and the lot line has been dissolved doesn't change the historic preservation perspective that they're built as two buildings, they were two separate styles, they remain within the district as two unique entities.
I would also like to note that in the letter that he was sent in November, it did state, hey, we understand there may have been some confusion with the change from the HBC to the Landmarks Commission. We're giving you some leeway with this, but understand that any exterior changes do need a COA. That was presented in the letter in November, as well as to all property owners of historic properties when that change did occur.
Do you recall receiving that?
I want to say yes, but I just don't have a copy of it. If it was sent out, I'm sure it was sent out. I don't know. So if we make the assumption that it was sent out and that the COA wasn't requested at that time, if I read the statute in its whole for the Landmark Commission, it doesn't talk about that specific issue after building permits have already been issued. So in my own defense, there's a lot going on through that period of time. Building has been a problem since the moment that we touched it. So, if it was issued, then it was issued. We also had at that
It is a
time.
transitional period, you know.
Well, we also at that time had
It's-
a sign permit that was requested. And that came before the commission in early December. But there was no discussion of any issues that the commission had with the building itself at that time, and yet the sign permit was brought to the COA.
Different building though, right?
Same building.
Wow.
Sure, I mean, it's the same property,
Different.
same building permit. So.
But according to our guidelines, it's a different place that we're talking about now.
Sure.
Where the sign was on the 224.
And the current ordinance took effect on August 21st. The city first received any notification of these changes to the smaller building in January after they'd already been effected.
The plans, I don't know how factual it is. I know that the building plans are dated the 15th of October. I don't know if that the city, there is a little bit of confusion there. You have to remember that the city, downtown in specific, the city is updated by the architect on a regular basis. If you look at how that building, any building plan would have adjusted or moved, the city is informed of those changes. What makes it more complicated is the change in from HPC as advisory to an actual commission. So the city has been updated either by updated prints or regular field reports from the architect that have been going to the city on a regular basis up until that point. So you may be right, Jason, I don't know. I don't know when the architect actually submitted the updated plan.
I'd still say there's some element of a transitional period here. I mean, personally, you know, in your, even though maybe you did have specific notice, and I mean, I'm sure that if they said it was done, it was done. But, you know, it's within a reasonable doubt for me, I guess, to say that it's transition. This is all kind of new to me. So. But, yeah, so we don't have guidelines as well, you know, like we're talking about having guidelines that were more specific and.
Well, you do have the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Right, yeah.
And those are, in my opinion, fairly clear that
Sure.
this should not be.
Sure. So what would happen if, with this denial, is there would be a fine imposed essentially? It would go before.
So the
council.
nitty-gritty of fines is beyond my field of expertise.
Okay,
The way I read the ordinance is that for every change to the plans that were reviewed by the HPC, those changes should have been brought to the LC for a certificate of appropriateness or denial thereof. I prefer not to look at the 222 to 224 because frankly, once the facade was being torn off, it was no longer a fight to have for a historic preservation perspective. The issue I have is that with 218 to 220, changes were made that were clearly under the new ordinance. The requirements of that ordinance had been clearly communicated, and no plans for those changes that have already been implemented were submitted until January copy that we got.
The plans that were submitted for the sign did show it in the new format. The ones that we approved.
Yes, well, the trouble here is that it's the owner's requirement to seek a certificate of appropriateness, not the city's job to see what's going on without the LC being aware of it.
Will there start you?
Yes, thank you. I was the chair of the HPC at that time, and I know there was a transition period here. I know that when the owner came in and talked to us about it, there was quite a bit of rancor as far as us feeling like we would agree to something like this as far as what he was doing with the buildings. The fact is we had no teeth, you know, so now that there's a landmarks commission, I guess the concern or the question I have, and Ian kind of raised it as well, part of it's the timing, you know, was the owner aware, were you aware? And you said you don't have a copy of it in front of you, but it seemed like at the time that we said, in fact, Stephanie, can you help me on this? I thought we denied something in November.
Not in November, in
August.
August. For last one, HBC recommended denial, it's non-binding, so they
Right,
went
so
forward
it's
with the building
non-binding.
plans.
But then again, you went out and you still came up and got your permits, you know, from inspection. And I guess the site plan, I'd like to know about the site plans, you know, who looked at those in terms of okaying this? The fact is, it is non-binding, so I want to know when that time frame was, and Jason, you mentioned something to the effect that in November, was that the time? As far as the work that they should have been aware of the work that,
Stephanie took the extraordinary step of sending a letter specifically reminding Mr. Neff that he has a legal obligation to approach the LC for a certificate of appropriateness to any changes that he proposes to the buildings.
and then when was that sent out? November?
November 17th.
November 17th. And when was the work done on the building?
After
October.
that,
In
Yeah.
October?
They submitted for building plans at late September, so within October is the timeframe in which they got approval of the building plans. That's when it came to my attention that their building plan did not match what the HBC had already approved.
So basically, the building plan would have been what you would need to hold on to move forward with your project. If you alter that in any way, then you're changing the site plan.
There is that component of it, but that doesn't always, people change their building plans and that's okay to go through the building inspection department to do so, but as the changes happen to historic buildings, they also have to seek our approval as they make those changes. It's not to say these things can't change, that they aren't fluid, it's that you don't just go to one stop and that's it. There's always been that, even with the HBC, there's that second layer of, okay, if you're gonna make these changes, you still have to go through this process. That part of this hasn't changed, it's like we added another step. So even if it were just the HBC and they wanted to make some changes, they still would have had the requirement of coming back to the HBC to go, okay, but we want to try this now. The review would have been necessary
Okay.
either way.
So in effect now, the building, as it stands, is not a contributing building to the district?
the tall three-story one on the books is still contributing, but no, if the owner applied for tax credits to do work, no, at this point, they would say, well, we need to revise the National Register paperwork to take that from contributing to non-contributing because the historic facade was removed in its entirety and replaced with new construction. Now, for 218 to 220, it was identified as a contributing building, no changes were identified by the owner, it remains a contributing building, even with the changes having been made, but these new changes, one, were not brought to the LC for a certificate of appropriateness, two, to be determined whether or not a COA would have been issued or will still be issued, and three, regardless of what the LC does, the ordinance states that work done without a COA shall be fined. I believe that's beyond the LC's control, but my legal advice is worth, peppermint in a candy dish, I guess, or something.
I think it all comes down to when that COA was sent out by the city, as far as the paperwork. And if it was done in a timely fashion, I couldn't see that being an issue.
Well, the building permit in the window is dated October 30th. We sent a letter November 17th saying, hey, by the way, any changes that you're making to the plans that you brought to HBC need to come in to go through LC. That hasn't been done until today. The physical changes to 218 to 220 didn't take place until after that November 17th letter, sometime either in December or January when the metal siding was put on and the brick stained. I don't know, I don't walk by it every day.
Is that a situation where inspection could go by unannounced and say, wait a second, this isn't correct, or is it that's not normally their job?
Well, that's effectively what has happened here is somebody with ties to the LC walked by and said, hey, wait a minute, that's not correct.
Yeah.
And yes, there was a building permit issued on October 30th, but the procedure that includes the landmarks condition was not adhered to. So, like I said, Stephanie took the extraordinary step of sending a letter to the owner, November 17th, saying, hey, make sure, you especially make sure, and changes then still happened after that letter date, and we're having this, what did we know, when did we know it, conversations.
Well, I know the situation they have between the HBC and Landmarks Commission. I know there's a transition period and there's some growth and all that. But I kind of go back to the letter that Stephanie had sent out early, and if the owner was aware of that, then I think that's something that needs to be looked at. That's all I have right now.
Well, I think that HPC meeting was on August 15th, and the new ordinance took effect August 21st. And, transition period or not, from August 21st onwards, the law was any changes need to be brought here. So,
I think most significantly, you're talking about, as you described, the extraordinary step of sending a letter.
well, we were proactive.
And while we're talking about transition period, I think that
Well, it's only
actually,
fair if something's in review and then they're
Right.
working on the project. I thought that should
to
make
me,
sense.
that frankly eliminates the idea
Sure.
there's a transition period
That-
that is profound notification. And frankly, I find it disturbing that it wasn't followed.
As far as the fines are concerned, the staff is able to establish fines and put those on to people who don't do the COA with or without your guidance. We can take into consideration how you guys feel about what types of fines or if they're appropriate. We don't have to do the fines, but if it was done without a COA and we feel that it was knowledgeably done without a COA, we're going to fine based on that shall in the ordinance. So you guys can give recommendations based off of those things, how you feel about that. So there are different situations in which a citation is required, some that don't require one at all, some are just a simple fine, so.
What are
some
the
of those are too.
guidelines for the fines, the dollar amounts?
It's at minimum $50 per day per offense that we are able to fine people, then the rest of it goes based on our nuisance code, so that starts at like $600-something, then there's a time frame in between. We're basically just following the other codes our department does, so that way it's all the same. But the minimum one is that $50 a day, that's usually gonna be used for people who don't apply for the COA, and we know they did work, they get 7 days to apply, and then from there it's $50 a day until Kingdom Come.
So what is the resultant of all of that?
Hopefully they comply, give us a COA
No,
application,
I
then they
mean,
come here.
in terms of this applicant right now.
I guess I don't
I
understand
mean,
the question.
If those fines were to be imposed, what would they be as of today?
The minimum, I think, is 500 that you have to do for a citation.
Would it be a citation for,
Not getting a COA before doing work. Again, still transition period, so between
right,
getting a new ordinance passed and then updating our fee schedule and then establishing that, tonight, actually, we're doing more text amendments to our Landmarks Commission ordinance at Plan Commission. So we do have some wiggle room here, but I'm not sure that I want to be that graceful with it, because then someone could come back later and say, well, you did it for them, so. The fees are not as clear as usual, we haven't done any of them yet either. so
no,
we're
right, that's
breaking
why I'm
them
asking,
too.
I guess.
The long-range concern with fines is that you may at some point run into a property owner who's willing to factor in fines as just the cost of doing business.
Mhm.
So if you have a one-time $50 fine for tearing down a historic building, that's not a particularly strong dissuasion to doing that.
Yes.
So $50 a day per offense, there is intent there that accumulates to be something significant, such that if somebody does tear down a historic building, every day that building's not there, that's gonna be $50 in perpetuity. And you gotta come to some new agreement real quick.
The floor is still open, correct? Do you have something you want to add, Jeff?
I really don't.
Okay.
Here just to learn. We've dealt with this business for many, many years. They are good people. They are contributing significantly to the downtown. When I take a look at the building that has been improved, that has said vacant and decrepit with about the ugliest facade in a building one could imagine. So purely, our organization does not take positions. We are not an urban design committee. We promote, we recruit, but we do know that the activation of this property is contributing nicely to the health of the downtown.
Thank you.
I have a couple of things, just to clarify so that we're on the same page. The building permit was issued on 10/5, is when the building permit was issued. There was a letter dated on that same day from the city of Green Bay, which I have, talking about the historic preservation ordinance update. The other thing is when we discussed, and you mentioned it before, if you look at, does 218 now not conform? You mentioned both in the documentation that was prior, this goes back to early 2018, and this was a write-up that you had done, Jason, and it basically just stated, despite the altered storefronts, this building retains a high degree of integrity. Building is one of several in the district that has received new facades during the historic period. Even you make a comment about that, actually in your write-up for tonight about it is a contributing, the 218 is a contributing property with current facade excluding storefronts. So the storefront is still here, the storefront has been repaired. How does it change the state of the building?
It's still contributing. And yes, those storefronts are not historic. The issue here that the Secretary of the Interior Standards gets into is a matter of the building's character.
Sure.
From that, you look at, say, unstained brick and sandstone versus stained brick and metal paneling. And to look beyond just that one building, which is, you know, representative of its style, it is one of 4 buildings of similar style. And none of those buildings have stained brick or corrugated-looking metal fascia panels. So in that sense, it's deleterious, it's damaging to the character of the building and the district to try to make it look more like its new facade neighbor joined twin building.
Yep.
That it really shouldn't look like the new facade of the 222 to 224. It should look more like the Hotel Northland, the YMCA, and the Architects Building around the corner on Pine Street. So by pulling it into the same aesthetic character as the 3-story building, you're removing it from the stylistic family to which it belongs, that includes the Northland, the YMCA, and the Architects Building. And, you know, as noted earlier, there's this unique cluster here. And the changes are bad for the district in that area.
And I concur with that. In a narrow vision, yeah, it does look good. It absolutely looks good. But we do need to look at the neighborhood in full.
Sure.
And I absolutely believe it takes it outside of the character of the neighborhood. But frankly, more importantly, I'm concerned that this entire process was not complied with. That the letter did not trigger what should have been a meeting with you a long time ago, COA. And I'm not going to ask you to explain, because it's obviously it didn't happen. And I think the point of this ordinance in our entire commission is that we avoid things like this.
Sure.
That we were proactive and the teeth of this ordinance is requiring people to comply. The teeth of our commission is to get people to comply. And unfortunately, I'm going to take the position that I do think we ought to impose a fine here, to send a message to the people in the community that are subject to our ordinance that you need to comply with this. And I agree with your example, Jason. If it's notional, if it's just a minor one, big deal. Becomes the cost of business. Because if we don't enforce this, then we have no point being here.
If you're referencing in particular the YMCA, how does that building comply with, you're only showing a portion of the YMCA? What about the full side of the YMCA that is 100% glass?
Yes.
How does that detract or represent the district as a whole? Does it take away from the overall aesthetic or the pleasing nature of the YMCA?
In my opinion, it does, but my opinion doesn't matter here.
Well, then I'll offer my opinion. Yes, you're absolutely right, it does, but that was also before this commission, before this ordinance that had the teeth. And if I had seen that ahead of time, I would have had the very objections you're raising.
Sure.
But that was before.
But the issue with the YMCA is you have 2 distinct structures
Right.
there, and the State of Wisconsin Historical Society did rule that the glass facade that you're talking about is not part of the period of significance for the building.
Correct.
That the 6-story building, which is the 1924 building, was the one that the state was concentrating on.
So they separated the two?
Well,
The
Essentially,
buildings
or-
were of 2 different
Generations.
time periods. And,
Sure.
I mean, obviously, whilst not everybody agrees with it, and that's fine, that project did receive $2 million worth of tax credits through the State Historic Preservation Office, and they had to review and approve it in order for that to happen. So if it wasn't compliant, it would never have gotten the dollars. So
Fair.
whether you like it or not, as a facade, it is a complementary facade. If you take a look at the Department of the Interior preservation briefs that talk about existing buildings and buildings with an addition, what they don't want you to do is to take an existing building and try to replicate it, try to put it back to when it was. What you're trying to do is identify something that's sympathetic to it in a style that's similar, but not a repeating style. So you'll see in that example for the YMCA, where the vertical mullions were in that facade before are where the vertical mullions of that glazing system are right now. That was done intentionally to keep those vertical lines referencing the past, but still allowing it to be its own building. So if you, as I said, if you read preservation brief number 14, which is new exterior additions to historic buildings, it clearly states in there that that is not to be a replicated building. We're not trying to replicate things. We're trying to put something that's sympathetic in nature to what it is. If you go back to the slide, that was the HPC piece from August. In my opinion, if I read that, that tells me that that building on the right-hand side, and I wasn't at the meeting, but that building on the right-hand side could have been EFISed over and still would be in compliance. If that had happened, you would have lost the entire integrity of that building on the right. That did not happen. What was modified was the piece at the bottom, which was done in 2008, which was not part of the historic fabric of that building. Whilst I agree the owner was notified and was not followed through on, I really don't believe what was done here has impacted that building negatively. I know what was done on the building adjacent to ours, the 3-story. Again, that building butts up against mine, so I have a bias. But the owner opted to keep that building as a 3-story building, even though the upper 2 floors of that are essentially an attic space, to make sure that that facade and that street line didn't have a missing tooth in it. It's still a 3-story building. It still has 0 setback on the upper 2 floors. It has an alignment with the building to the right and to the left of it. I think the owner's already gone to significant lengths to address the historic integrity of that building by not effacing over the right-hand side and limiting what it can do on the left.
I'm struggling with the way the ordinance is written, and I don't know that we have any control over that, but it says that if the work is done that doesn't have a COA, then the first step is that the work needs to be corrected, and then the second step is the forfeiture established by the common council. So if we don't approve, or we decide that the work is not in compliance and there's no COA been issued for 218, then are we at the juncture of having the property owner have to come back and resubmit for the stained brick and the planters to rebuild those? Is that what we're really saying?
I think that we have a pretty good understanding that that stain is not coming off of the brick. Like, we've come too far, that's probably not coming back off the brick. So I think that we need to find a solution for that in this meeting. Whether that's fine or just saying, you did it, you shouldn't have, whatever you guys find to be appropriate. The whole idea of the work done without a COA clause is that we want to have the ability to do fines or citations, but we also know that the review is what we really want. We want people to be able to come here for this review.
Mm-hmm.
So within the review process, we're supposed to work with staff and applicant to find a solution to the problem. So if you think that there is a solution to be had with, I mean, the stain's not coming off, the other work was already done. So if we're looking at the metal wrapping at the bottom, you think that there's a solution to be done there, that can be part of your conditions of approval. So if you want to submit for a COA as just the bottom is okay with the metal wrapping, or remove the metal wrapping and add this onto here, if you want to come to a design solution, you're able to do that as part of a condition. And then they would have to comply with that. If they're not comfortable with that, we can either discuss that here, or they can come back to another meeting. So design solutions are part of the conditions that you can impose onto somebody as part of, you can work done without a COA or with a COA, it doesn't matter, that's your right as a commission.
And I guess just add, if you feel that you would have approved this with a COA had it come sooner, then by all means you can issue a COA for it now. I don't know that that negates the fact that it was done without the
Right.
COA, but, you know, if you like this, then hey.
Well, as I said earlier too, I don't know how you would undo that without causing substantial damage to the property.
I believe that there's wood underneath the 218 building, right?
Is
Aren't
it?
those planter box, isn't that wood?
No,
They
sandstone.
look like stone before.
It's sandstone.
Yeah.
What would it look like if that came off?
Well, if you ever
It wasn't in
messed with
good shape
sandstone, I mean,
before.
it kind of just crumbles.
It looked just like this. I mean, this is it.
There was a picture that had it on there, I think.
There it is.
That's sandstone?
It's
Oh, well,
like-
yeah,
It is
yeah, the
sandstone.
black part on the bottom, right.
It's difficult, the picture doesn't do justice to the condition that it was in, but it was sandstone back in 2008 when we put it on there. So it's a little bit tough to,
Can you zoom in a little further?
I don't know, but I'm gonna try. Maybe not.
Because it wasn't in the best of shape. You can see some of it on the bottom right-hand side of the main entry door starting to spoil.
Yeah, I don't know if that's kind of
Yeah.
failure due to moisture, or if the stone material behind it is,
I think it's moisture from the planter behind it.
So, my opinion is that if the property owner had come before this commission tonight with the intention of doing some work to this building, and we were presented with this photo, I believe that I would recommend that obviously, no work other than restorative work happen to any of the brick and the limestone and the facade above the glazing. Knowing that all of the glass below that horizontal line is new modern material that were installed in the 2000s, to me, it would be our responsibility as the commission to ask the property owner to restore the lower portions of the facade to what the building originally looked like. We don't have that in this instance. We've got a facade that was modified in the 2000s, and we've now cleaned that up and changed that because of maintenance issues with the staining of the brick and the application of the metal on the planters. Because that portion of the facade isn't historic to the building, I look at it as, no, is it historic to the district? It's not, but I don't believe that there's been a change any more detrimental to the building as a whole than what was done in 2008 when the sandstone and that brick was put on the building then. In my mind, the mistakes were made back in 2008 when the facade wasn't restored to its original character.
the 2008 facade replaced a worse yet 1960s facade or something, there's.
Exactly, and so you get caught in that trap. So I guess what I'm saying is, even though I know that the architecture as it sits today isn't applicable to the rest of the district and the other buildings around it, I don't believe that these changes have done
So you would
any
have,
more detriment than what was already there.
would you have approved, or voted to approve the staining, you wouldn't have voted to approve the staining of the brick, though?
Well, I don't think we don't have that opportunity. The brick wasn't original to the building,
Right.
so I guess my
No, but
brick,
it's the character of it's the unpainted brick as a character issue.
understood, it's a more modern material as opposed to just regular brick, but, I look at it like, the brick appears to be a close match to the original facade, but again, you can tell by looking at it,
Yeah,
it's not original to the building, so
Sure.
my personal comment is, what difference does it make at that point?
Right.
I go the other way, like the three-story building next door, if that building was coming before this commission now, I wouldn't have accepted any of the work that was done there, because I do think that even though that facade may have been failing, there should have been a solution to restore that facade to what the original building looked like.
But that wasn't the original.
Right, I understand that.
That was facade number 2 on that
I
building.
get that, but those
Okay.
photos do exist, and
Oh, 3?
And,
The third floor was an addition right on it,
That's
so
right.
there's a lot of layers there too.
Yeah.
I mean, at a minimum, the idea that that we went back with ephes and metal cladding on the three-story building, to me, was a mistake. I guess in summary, though, I guess my opinion is that I'm willing to live with the work that was done on 218. I'm disappointed that it wasn't brought before this commission, because the ordinance was certainly in effect. It was sent out to all the property owners, everybody knew about it. That being said, I don't know what, to me, the idea of the forfeiture is, maybe it's deserved, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do, because I don't know that it does anything, other than build bad will in the community over, if we're really objecting to it that much, then we should ask the property owner to tear all that stuff down and restore it to what it was. And-
Set a precedent for people who want to make changes in the future.
And I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think the building looks any worse now than it did in 2008, or is, to go another way, I think it looks better now than it did in 2008.
Maybe
So-
the next unwarranted change will be more damaging, though.
If
I
we,
mean,
well,
like
if we
Ed
were talking
said.
about changes to the rest of the facade of
Right.
218, I wouldn't be saying this.
I would agree with that.
I mean, the integrity of the building, for the most part, is still there from, the historic parts of that facade. And what we're sitting here debating is work that was never in harmony with the historic nature of the district anyways.
Mhm.
So would you vote then or motion to approve a COA then?
I feel like we're.
Or to retroactively, can we do that?
I feel we're in a tough spot, because if we deny the COA, it doesn't give us any option other than either having them try and restore the work back to 2008 or establish the forfeiture. And I don't think either one gets us anything here.
Just a reminder, staff can still do a forfeiture with or without a COA. If the work was done, we have the option to do it, so that's kind of opposite of this.
Is it the intent to do that?
Jason and I will have to debrief after this meeting.
My feeling is, I don't know if this is possible, but I don't feel like we should be issuing a certificate of appropriateness, because it isn't, and it wasn't done in the proper procedure. But that being said, I guess, can you have the work done? It's obviously hasn't violated a building code issue,
Right.
and so the work is done without the certificate of appropriateness, and it just, at that point, dies?
And then is that the end of it? I mean, there's, other than the imposition of fines, that's it. It's just like, never in the future to be appropriate?
I believe Jason
My-
is.
Oh.
My feeling on this, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the LC could put forward a motion and act on that to deny the certificate of appropriateness, and the LC could put forward a motion to recommend to the city staff that no fine be implemented, but just like my recommendations at that point, it's a recommendation. Right? So the ordinance is pretty clear, thou shalt be fined. As to whether or not that happens, that's not in my cubicle, so I don't know.
That's my cubicle. As far as concerning the COA issue, if you want to approve or deny that, you have to do one or the other. We have to do the review, we issue a COA or we don't issue a COA. That should be solely based on whether you think the work was appropriate or not, nothing else. Not following the process has nothing to do with that, except for the fines and the understanding that we hope this doesn't happen again, mostly. But the COA should just be based on the design, the building, and what you guys feel is the best recommendation for the design that's proposed. So you could certainly approve a COA and we still do the fine for not having a COA. You could deny a COA and we could not do the fine. Those things are not exclusive to each other.
For reference, I did bring along a copy of the, I had a feeling you might want to see this, but this is a copy of what the property looked like prior to the renovation back in 2008. And then it shows a migration between pre-2008 to today. The items that are listed on the end, those are drawings referencing the 1921 building plans, where it shows that storefront as it existed. It's similar, somewhat, in respect to what the building looked like in 2008. Most of the buildings down in this area, they're always split in half. They're, pretty much all of them are about 44 feet wide, and generally they're split down the middle. We saw the same thing with the Lou's Buttery building. You essentially had two storefronts. That's very, well, at least consistent to our two buildings. It was two specific storefronts. But even back in the 1920s, when the drawings were developed by the Lucia brothers, it shows you're just glass, just a standard glass. Their detail has more to do with everything else that goes on around the fascia of the building is done in high detail. So if you look at the original drawings back in the 20s, this, all of this detail is done very specifically, even down to the size and shape of the spheres that are located on the building, even to the size and scope of the shield, coat of arms, whatever you want to call it. But the facade, even back in the 20s, was how it looked basically in 2008 before we made renovations to the returns and planter boxes. So it's more just informational to have.
Is the work done? Everything done?
It's open
No.
for business.
So,
Well, the addition is open. There is still work that's going to be done on the building.
I'm sorry, talking about the facade, outside. Or is there more that
Yes,
you need?
with the
to see?
exception of the canopy, if you pull the pictures back up, the work that remains is, there is some final coloration that needs to occur in these spots that had to be
Finish
stopped
coat
due to
on
weather.
this.
That's why it's two different colors at the moment. And then this canopy here is simply being wrapped with a newer material. It's not being taken down or altered, it's just being covered with a different material. And then the rods are being painted, those are still the original color of white or whatever that color was from back then. So it's very limited work that needs to be done to quote complete the project beyond stuff that's going on in the back of the building to repair damage in the rear of the building, which is something different. So there is some small amount of work that needs to be done on the Lou's Buttery building, which cannot be done until better weather.
Okay. Thank you.
You had a comment?
No, this is other questions.
Motion to close the floor?
Motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we need to take action on this. I will throw out the first volley, and I will make a motion for denial of the certificate of appropriateness with recommendation that no further action be taken on this property.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion?
Only discussion is I'm gonna abstain from the vote, so I feel I'm too close to it.
I would
Not that
just
I agree or disagree with it.
absolutely like to hear a discussion from everybody, because I think this is probably a pretty controversial item on the agenda tonight, and I certainly value everybody's opinion as to where we're going with this.
Yeah, first of all, I'll rescind my second, and I'll tell you why I'll say that. In your argument, when you were talking about the property, really no further damage has been done from the 2008 picture. And, I mean, whether or not we can, I guess the question is whether or not we can or can't. You said either way we can or cannot issue a certificate of appropriateness.
Then they can come back with it and make try and get another certificate, come back to another meeting where we will debate again about what further work will be appropriate or not. Or can they reapply for another certificate?
So confused.
I'm sorry, can they reapply, can they reapply for another certificate if we deny this thing?
Always.
Yes,
Yes.
okay, so
But
it's
the
not the end,
denial-
it's not the end of the line necessarily.
I think there needs to be further consideration with things that have already been done.
Okay.
If you're denying the COA, you're, without any sort of condition or recommendation, you're saying, bring it back to what it was. So if you want to deny and say, but feel free to leave the things you've already done, just don't do anything further to this building.
Gotcha.
So you can have that as part of a recommendation, or you can say, we're approving it with the understanding that A, B, and C. Either you approve of the design as it sits, no further conditions because it's already done, or you can say, we deny it, but you don't have to restore it.
Gotcha, okay, and that's what you're saying.
That's essentially what I was saying.
Okay, gotcha, all right. In
Because I
that
do
case-
find that argument compelling, that this is stuff from 2008. What does it matter what is done to it?
Right.
I mean, it does
Sure.
look good, it doesn't matter. And that actually is a very compelling argument. Again, I'll go back to what I said before. The system wasn't followed, the process wasn't followed, and it should have been.
Agreed.
And I think we do need to make a statement in order to give credibility to this group, to what we do.
Well, but again, by us denying a certificate of appropriateness, we're not the ones who would levy the forfeiture in the first place. That would come by a staff recommendation to the common council, is the way I understand it.
Yes. You guys can make recommendations to the staff on how you feel is appropriate action, but our department makes the final decision.
And so in the spirit of my motion, what I guess I was saying is that, again, I don't feel any more detriment to the building has been caused by the current work. And as long as no more work is done to the facade that would take away from its historic character, I'm comfortable leaving this situation as it is today. And in my mind, the recommendation would be that there's no further action taken by the city in this matter, simply because I don't know, I understand what you're saying about, yeah, the procedure wasn't followed. But in the same token, to me, it would be more valuable if there was materials that were taken off the building or the facade was made in worse condition by the opinion of this commission, then I think we'd be asking the property owner to restore it or fix it. But I didn't hear anybody tonight say that we can't stand the way the building looks as it sits, so why would we not just let it be? And in that regard, other than proving our point, I don't know what the forfeiture does.
I think by denying the condition of approval, you're basically making that statement.
And that's the way I feel about it, that by denying the certificate of appropriateness, we're saying, no, we do not as a commission agree with this work. We didn't agree with the fact that it happened without the proper approvals, and so the next time somebody's sitting here, we haven't hurt ourselves as far as the precedent we're establishing for this commission, the district, those types of things.
Yeah. Well,
So you want to remake the motion?
I'll second the motion for denial with no further action.
Stephanie, what do you have written down for the motion right now?
Denying the certificate of appropriateness with the understanding that no removal is required of the stained brick or metal fascia and recommending no further action taken by LC staff.
Perfect. That would be my motion.
All right, I have a first from Paul.
I'll second.
More discussion? Veronica?
I really don't have anything to add to it. I agree with what you're saying as far as, you know, it didn't affect anything because the facade had been changed in 2008. You know, in my opinion, it looks nice with, 222, is that, 224? But yeah, those changes, it didn't follow the timeline, so I agree with the denial, because it didn't, they were made aware of it, they didn't come in, so, yep, let's go ahead and deny the COA, so long as, unless no other changes take place.
Just a point of clarification, the denial of the COA does not mandate that the building owner return
Correct.
to this commission to review it until we do approve something, correct?
No, as it's written right now, if we were to just deny it, we would have to come to some sort of solution. This is a denial with the understanding that nothing needs to be remedied at this point. So if there are any further changes from what is on that building,
Right,
new process.
got it.
Okay.
Everything that's
Yep.
there would be considered okay.
Okay.
What about for the work that is not yet completed?
As in the ethos and the overhang,
Yes.
that was part of the HPC approval initially,
Okay.
so that's set.
Okay.
A yes vote is for denial.
Where is my voting screen?
Yeah. Looking for the same
Mine's
as well.
wiped out.
Mine popped up.
Mine too, as well.
Who's did?
I'm done, did voted.
I didn't see someone pop up yet.
I do not have that as well.
Right, do you guys want a voice vote for me, please?
I would vote yea.
Nay.
All right, that passes 4-1 with one abstention.
Okay, that would conclude item D for regular business. Thank you.
Thank you. So what is our next step?
Continue on as you would, and Jason and I will follow up concerning if there's going to be any citation or not.
Okay. So I'm clear in the future, although I've read the statute as you've written it, the ordinance as you've written it. The ordinance gets into a fair bit of detail regarding even cleaning of the front of the building. It does not deal with issues that are not part of the fascia. I'll give you a simple example. In 2019, 218's building needs to have its roof replaced, but it is in the rear of the building. The second story portion of the back building that faces the alley. Now, to make that roof repair is quite extensive. Does that roof repair have to be brought here for approval, even though it is not street side?
Everything exterior comes before either the Landmarks Commission or its staff, unless it's just general maintenance as in patching, painting, that kind of stuff. So a roof replacement is under the purview of Jason and I to approve, so that takes about a week at most.
Okay, so.
But
my-
everything requires an application, and if you're not sure, call me.
So,
My
Roof repair
comment would be,
wouldn't come before the
there is a
commission.
stone coping on the facade, and depending on your roofer, they're gonna wanna come over the top and wrap that with some sort of ugly metal coping. And
this is
that-
at the rear of the building, though.
Yeah, this is
Not at
behind
the
that.
front.
Past that?
It's the building behind, there's a two-story building behind that.
Okay.
That abuts the alleyway, that abuts the YMCA.
Yeah, there are two.
Are we
well,
concerned about the character of the alleyway?
Not unless it's a predominant
Ah,
alleyway, which I don't think.
Yeah, I'm the only person
I have an
that can see
alleyway
that roof is me.
off my back right
From
now,
my
so I'm
office,
not
I can
con-
see
I am
the roof,
concerned
but
with the
that's,
character. The character's in it, more or less. but-
Well, I just want to be
Everything's
certain
considered.
I understand it
yep,
correctly, so that if it does require it, because to your point, what is the damage on the rear of the building, which is the second story,
right.
which is approximately, I want to say about 60 feet deep, 60 to 80 feet deep, from the street side, from the fascia of the building, before it goes to a second story. So it is not a visual element to the street side. But because of the damage that's incurred, and because we cannot change it because of public service, the proximity of power lines, and also because that location centers around, that powers the entire block, we are at the mercy of public service, and we've been trying to work with them for almost, well, a year and a half to get that resolved. But the roof is gone. It's,
So this, yeah, this is the building.
I was trying to
This
pull
is
it
the
up.
front of the building that we just looked at. This is the three-story building that we just looked at. It's the roofing of this building, right,
yeah, yeah.
in this location.
Well, frankly, that's the type of thing I doubt that would even get to this commission.
Right.
No.
You would just approve it at staff level, and it would be a very, very simple process for
Okay.
you.
To be, that's fair. I just want to make sure I understand it. And then as far as the enhancements to the front of Lou's Bouterie, so I understand it, Stephanie, correctly, that we can finish what the intent was on the Lou's Bouterie portion,
Yes.
which is the canopy, and then we have to finish the painting and things like that.
And
The,
yeah, and the rear of the building, right?
in the rear of the building. What about lighting inside the building? Because the bottom half of the building is pushed inward. The lighting that's used in that patio area, that outside patio area, that's not fascia, that's lighting. If we went from a pendant, I'm saying, from a can light to a pendant, does that have to come
You mean on the ceiling
back?
portion of the patio?
Yes.
No.
So, no, we don't have to come back for that?
That's like a porch to me, so I wouldn't think so.
It's exterior, but it's within the.
But it's kind of
coverage the
interior.
building. Yeah, right.
Well, right, that's where it's
Exterior.
gray.
Yeah.
That's the gray
It's
area.
all covered
We just-
under the HPC back in August when the
Yeah.
building was kind of, smile, salute, it's whatever you want it to be.
Right. Okay. So basically, when in doubt, ask.
Yes, please.
Fair enough, right? And
And
then,
please share that.
and then work through the whatever challenges there might be on that? Okay. Okay, sounds good. Thank you for the conversation and consideration.
Thank you.
Item E, informational, staff level applications.
We just had the one, Jason, if you could advance that slide. Also, a friendly reminder that Veronica and I have a meeting to get to in 15 minutes.
That's great.
This was the only COA we received since our last meeting. The Throton Theater opened, I think, in December. This was also done without a COA, so they got a nice friendly letter from me as well. This is a temporary sign face. They're gonna be doing the entire marquee at some point, but they just needed the new structure to show their new business. So the white will not be there forever. They're gonna be doing the entire marquee, from what I understand.
What is the
Put up these-
timeline on that?
Kind of semi-transparent
Yeah.
sheets.
So it looks kind of cheesy, but it is temporary.
But this is forthcoming, and something's gonna end up here
Yes.
sooner or
I
later.
think that they're waiting until summertime.
Okay,
I
so it's
think
not
they're
like
doing
a,
most of the work themselves.
okay, so it's not like an 8 to 10 year temporary fix,
No.
it's
No.
temporary.
So within this year, I think they're getting money from the city through a program, so.
Okay.
Okay, raise and repair orders,
Could I actually get you to receive and place that
Oh.
staff on file, please?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Need a motion to place the staff level application on file?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next item is review raise and repair orders and demolitions.
There were none.
Great. Next item would be staff update.
So we had a couple different things that were discussed, I believe, at the January meeting, that you guys wanted to discuss the awards program, district design guidelines, and then also our CLG update. The CLG one, I can tell you right now, we are meeting in 15 minutes to discuss that at Plan Commission. That will give us the updates that the state wanted us to make to our ordinance that they didn't feel complied with our original update, and then a couple things that our legal team has added. So just some very minor revisions. Once those are done and through council, which will be on March 5th, then we can send that back to the state to hopefully get our certified local government status up and going. Has to report out with more than 2 weeks between meetings. So many changes in this area. But the other stuff Jason can brief you on.
Yes, it's an eye chart. Short of making it red and green for my own benefit. The HPC issued awards from 2002 to 2015, and again in 2017, no awards in 2016, 2018. These are the 6 categories that they looked for. You know, they would seek nominations from the community. In some squishy, fuzzy way, they often overlapped a bit with the Brown County Historical Society's Historic Preservation Awards. The Brown County's group has different categories, some same, some different, but if you don't do awards, somebody else county-wide is doing awards. There's no requirement that the HPC or the Landmarks Commission do awards, but rather it used to be done, and still could be done under your mandate of educating the public. My personal opinion is that between the HPC and you, you've done a good job of educating the public. I don't know that you need to keep doing it, or if you do, maybe not annually. I don't know. This is something completely different. So this is the situation on awards, just in a nutshell. I do have a list of all the previous award winners. I do not know exactly which category each of those previous winners was in, but somebody was smart enough to print out a year-by-year list for me that I found, so that's good. Generally, we would do these awards in May, Historic Preservation Month. There's a timeline of events that usually begins at the end of January, beginning of February to make all that happen.
It should also be noticed, historically, these were done in a very cheesy, like, mixer before a city council that no one showed up to. You got a plaque that we couldn't afford anyway that half the people did put up. I don't think that was very effective, and I don't really think that it falls under like the education part of it. So we could move this to be something that we don't do all the time, just when we feel something really warrants it. We can do it when, if we want to do something in the summer, do a walking tour of the award recipients, or do a tour of all the things that got approval within the year. There are a lot of different ways that we can run this program if you want to run it at all. So I don't know if you guys just want to sit on it. We can send you guys some data about what we've done in the past, and then you guys can just come back with different ideas. But it doesn't have to be a strict formal award thing. It can be much more fun if we want it to be.
Does the commission have a budget?
Sort of. It's very small. It's basically when it snows too much and JC can't come to work all the time, we have a little bit of extra money, so.
That happens quite a bit, actually.
I do like the concept of the categories that are up there, I think are good. And I like the concept of the idea that we don't establish a formal annual program, but that we leave it up to this commission, that if something crosses our desks, that we have the opportunity to nominate it for special recognition. Because otherwise, I think you run into the problem of, if you have an annual program and you don't have projects that are, you start to get into that impression of just trying to nominate things to fill the categories.
You're talking about connectivity. If it comes before us, then it's connected to what we do.
Yeah. So I just feel like if we do something, I think it should be based on if we're aware of something in the community, we can take that on as a special item at any one of our meetings. And
Merit as it appears.
yeah.
When awards were presented, there wasn't always a winner of each category. There were years where there was one thing brought forward in one of these categories, but my feeling again is that we were always scraping to get nominations, and it became one of those monsters that feeds on itself, that we need to keep doing this. And there was a time too when all these would then go on the website, the city website, which furthered the education aspect, but the website went away a long time ago. I guess we're in a rebuilding decade or something. I don't know when the next website will come along, but currently we don't have much of an educational outreach on our Landmarks Commission website.
So did you need any action on this?
No, this is just for you guys to absorb. We can discuss at the next meeting if you would like. When it comes to something like this, we can either just do it as we please, or I can write up some sort of a draft policy that we would use for establishing when we would do the awards, how we would do them.
Could you, at a minimum, I guess, that slide you just had up, make sure that's in the meeting minutes?
We cannot put it in the minutes, but I can email it out to everybody.
Yeah,
If you would, yeah, please.
I mean, what about tying it in with the mayor's beautification? Wouldn't have to be something that we would have our own special event, but if there were things during the course of the year that we thought warranted it, that we could piggyback on that, or?
There are two separate mayor's beautification things. One is the actual mayor who holds his event every fall, and then there is the mayor's beautification committee, which is not tied to the city at all. So I don't think we could piggyback on that because it's not a city entity. Very confusing. So,
Indeed.
yes, so
Seems the mayor's
the
beautification
ward,
was, you would think it would be.
yeah, the ones that are always at Riverside or wherever that is on Main Street,
Yeah.
that is through the mayor's office, they put that on. So if we wanted to add one or two to that every year, we could discuss that with them, versus the mayor's beautification committee is completely separate from the city and not associated with the mayor anymore at all.
I think we should
So,
just do our own thing. We don't even know if the next mayor will continue that program.
That's right.
Mhm.
but it's something there, if you think of other programs that you're like, oh, this kind of fits in the same thing, we could obviously just ask to piggyback, it's way easier too. So.
Right.
At the last meeting, we also briefly discussed district guidelines, and I'll make sure this gets included in the email. I think it's all in the same file currently anyway. And I'm a little bit on the fence about creating district guidelines. So what do we have? We do have the Secretary of the Interior standards. And those are not just a short list, you know, there's 120, 30, 40, 50 pages of Secretary of the Interior standards. They do not zero in on the specific buildings in any one of our district, but they're, you know, the big general rules to live by. Like, you should probably do this, you probably shouldn't do this. We also have something very similar to guidelines. We have individual property data sheets. So for every house in Astor, we've got a picture of that house, and we've gone through and we've figured out, okay, this is, the character is, say, a Queen Anne, you know, so you should keep its Queen Anne-ness. And it has these original windows, or leaded glass things, or original siding, or decorative gingerbread bits. So we've got that identified.
Where do those live, Jason?
They live in a giant spreadsheet on the city drive. They could be emailed as well, but it's not fun reading.
Sure. We are trying to make it a better document, more of like a thing that we can actually share, but right now it's just kind of chaos that's in our iDrive. So
Yep.
we're working on that.
There's one sheet for each property.
Mhm.
And as best I've been able to, I also identify alterations to those properties, or you know, trivial bits like this house was moved here in 1965, and you wouldn't know it by looking at it, that kind of stuff. In addition to that, for Astor in particular, you do have the, I forget what it's called, you know,
The Blue Book.
the big book of Astor is what I call it. So, you know, if I had a lot of time on my hands, I'd like a new revision of that that includes historical information that's come up since, and pictures and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, you know, I can't go back in time and take a picture of when it was built, and probably you're never gonna find these pictures. But these are things that we do have. What we don't have is district-specific guidelines. Per ordinance, it says that we shall prepare a plan for each district. Well, we haven't. A couple of examples, you'll be able to check these out in the email. Milwaukee clearly has some law in place that says thou shalt do this, and every district guideline they has looks like a zero value added regurgitation of something. You know, where it's a copy-paste document that really doesn't tell you anything more than the Secretary of the Interior standards. Don't tell your friends I said that in Milwaukee. That's just my opinion. A couple of other ones here. These are kind of nice. The two in the middle, they start showing details. You know, like, hey, here's some pictures of windows that are appropriate to your Queen Anne house. And pictures of windows that are not really appropriate to a Queen Anne house. With the big book of Astor, you could go one further if you really got into it and say, well, here are the original windows, 2/2 types with button, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's kind of a nice thing to reach for. Maybe it's not going to happen. A crazy end of the rainbow type situation, Long Beach, California. They've got basically a glossy looking book for each of their 15 or so districts with pretty pictures, and it gets down to the really nitty gritty of here's your paint color options, here's your gutter guy to call for gutters. By the way, it's a lot of Adobe looking, if not Adobe itself. So the texture of your stucco is important to, you know, this is deep stuff. I wouldn't recommend we reach for that star. So, this will all be in the email, it's food for thought, we can consider it further. And again, you know, although it says we have to have these things, I really wouldn't want to get sucked into the trap like Milwaukee has, where they've answered the phone and phoned it in again, saying, yeah, here it is, but so what? We do have a lot of good information that a lot of communities don't have. That's my point in telling you, you know, what we do have is pretty spectacular, but what we don't have is this, you know, narrow band of when they want to make an alteration to something that's not historic anyway, how do we steer that? Or if you get a question about, I want my driveway to go from 1 car width to 2 car widths. Well, okay, that's interesting. Or somebody's got a Queen Anne house, not to pick on Queen Anne, and none of the windows are original. They want to put in new windows, but they want to go with a nice 6/6 colonial revival looking thing. And you know deep in your soul that that never had a 6/6 window. But what are you going to do with it? So that's where the guidelines would fill the gaps.
I think the Secretary of the Interior Standards is a document that if everybody on this commission hasn't read it in its entirety, should. It's a hefty document, but I think it'll shine a different light on maybe what the recommendations are and what some of our perceptions are of what isn't acceptable. I think there's a lot of good info in here, and I think if we're looking for something to base our decision-making off, this is what the State Historic Preservation Office will utilize, this is what the tax credits utilize, this is what I think we should utilize.
And I try to reference these things, but, you know, it's one person's opinion on how to interpret that. For example, when we talked about the garage door over in Washington, not Washington, on Broadway, you know, the Secretary of the Interior Standard says you should avoid introducing windows with additional grid-like appearances. It's like, well, damn. Okay, I guess I'd still recommend that we let them do it because it kind of makes sense. In the case of the Chop House, you know, yeah, none of this is historic material, but we talk about character in the Secretary Standards, and we got these squishy, non-quantifiable concepts. And just as my opinion is, no, that's not appropriate, it's an opinion. And sadly, it's never going to be objectively quantifiable in a scientific way. So, yes, please, by all means, read this. And if we disagree personally, that's fine too. I'm just one person's opinion, right?
Right. That's a good point.
Okay.
I think Stephanie gave you a CLG ordinance update. For the sake of brevity, I don't mind just ending abruptly.
Next meeting is Monday, March 11th. Unless anybody has any other business, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And for those of you who haven't seen it, there's a TV show on, I think it's HGTV, it's called Windy City Rehab.